So these are some notes from Annie Jacobsen's Area 51. Underground tunnels in Area 51 are called N tunnels and P tunnels, as well as T tunnels. For example, the 1,150-foot long tunnel at Jackass Flats that was drilled into the Calico Mountains. 1960s, tunnel dug into Rainier Mesa, Area 12, reached down about 4,500 feet, about 1 mile underground. Greenbrier Bunker, located in Allegheny Mountains, 250 miles southwest of the nation's capital. 1959, Department of Defense constructed a 112,544 square feet structure, 800 feet below the West Virginia wing of the five-star Greenbrier Resort. Completed 1962. Presidents and members of Congress would go here in the case of a nuclear attack. Had dormitories, a mess hall, decontamination areas, a hospital of 35 doctors. Conspiracy theorists believe these officials are only concerned with protecting themselves, not the American people, and not national security. Most of the tunnels at Area 51 were constructed in Area 12. This is 16 miles due west of Area 51 in the Rainier Mesa, as stated. 1957, massive underground tunnels were drilled here, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. A single tunnel took on average about 12 months. Most tunnels were about 1,300 feet below, 100 feet wide. At least 67 nukes detonated there. Missile nose cones to satellite radiation effects tested. The pile driver experiments tested underground bunker survivability. The hardtack experiments sought how, quote, to destroy enemy targets, and for emphasis here, such as, added, missile silos and command centers by use of megaton bombs. In T-tunnel, scientists made vacuum chambers to simulate outer space, expanding on upper atmospheric tests like teak and orange. Even tested the Department of Defense how nukes stored in an underground bunker would hold up to a nuke attack. Underground rail systems factor into conspiracy theories because the Department of Defense says they made them to haul heavy equipment. For the T-tunnel simulated outer space experiments, the bomb was the first on the scene. The bomb was cemented in the back of the tunnel in what was called the Zero Room, as told by Richard Mingus. Mingus would guard this from 8 to 12-hour shifts. He didn't like it because it reminded him of working in coal mines. The Test Ban Treaty of 1963 had the Pentagon reversing public policy on nuke tests. Prior, it was usually announced 3:30 a.m. the day of. Now the information was, quote, classified secret, end the quote. Where the tests were taking place, how big they'd be, this was no longer public knowledge. If a scientist predicted the shockwave would be felt in Vegas, 65 miles to the south, a public notice would be sent. According to conspiracy theorists, the CIA is orchestrating this plot. NASA did the lunar landing fraud, the underground tunnels, and the Department of Defense as well. Yet, and heavy emphasis on this statement, yet it is the Atomic Energy Commission that has an underlying part to play in all three. The AEC has used a convenient, panic-strewn public response. It gave stamps of top secret and then let the public blame the CIA, NASA, DOD. The AEC has changed its name 4 times, and maybe it's more fair to say 3, I would say, but we'll go with what Annie was saying in the book here. So World War II, it was known as the Manhattan Project. 1947, the Atomic Energy Commission. 1975, Energy Research and Development Administration, or ERDA. 1977, Department of Energy, or DOE. Quoting from the book here, the government department whose mission is to advance technology and promote related innovation in the United States, reads the DOE's mission statement. This makes it, again, this is Annie here, this makes it sound more like the Apple Corporation than the federal agency that produced 70,000 nuclear bombs. End the quote. 2000. Nuclear weapons side got a new name, National Nuclear Security Administration, or NNSA, a department that is nestled inside the Department of Defense. August 2010, Nevada test site renamed Nevada National Security Sites, or NNSS. Since the NSA Act of 1947, the Department of Defense, the Central Intelligence Agency, the Army, the Navy, the United States Air Force have all kept their names. Cabinet-level Department of State Labor, Transportation, Justice, and Education, all of these departments in the government are the same names as well. FBI has changed its name once since 1908. Originally, it was called BOI, the Bureau of Investigations. Many AEC records are gone, so is the government's hope, its nefarious deeds. Is the hope that the government is hoping here that we'll forget these terrible deeds? Is that really what, that's kind of what you end up coming to the conclusion of? The AEC made a wilderness of mirrors, all its own, against the American public. James Angleton, CIA, paranoid of KGB, Nonsenko affair. Yuri Ivanovich Nosenko, KGB officer, purported double agent. Angleton imprisoned him 3 years, hoping he would break. Passed many polygraph tests, and was released. Angleton was fired and left the agency in disgrace, his personal downfall. May 1st, 1995, Clinton's Memorandum on Secret Radiation Experimentation in the United States, called formally the Official Classification Policy to Cover Up Embarrassment, named so because of a fished-up 1947 AEC memo. AEC General Manager John Derry wrote it. Clinton's staff called it the Derry Memo. In it, the AEC ruled, quoting, all documents and correspondence relating to matters of policy and procedures, the given knowledge of which might compromise or cause embarrassment to the Atomic Energy Commission and or its contractors, should be classified secret or confidential. Clinton's staff found another document that read, there are a large number of papers which do not violate security, but do cause considerable concern to the Atomic Energy Commission, Insurance Branch. And it went on further to say that anything should be, quote, reworded or deleted. The DARPA Internet Program, meant as a system for military communication during Vietnam in particular, ironically became the continued breeding grounds for conspiracy theories against the government. During the 1980s, most of what happened in Area 51 is unknown. There was a mock helicopter attack on the facility guard station. It was so serious, the Pentagon and White House stepped in. A potential weakness was a low-flying helicopter attacked. Quoting here, a helicopter could be trucked in and then launched only a short distance from the restricted area. Mingus would take part in preparedness tests with low-flying balloons to simulate helicopters. Used an aging V-100 commando armored personnel, used in plural, used those personnel carriers, complete with mounted machine guns that were left over from Vietnam. These 40-inch weather balloons were target practice. Quoting the book here, the Nevada test site was the single most prolific atomic bombing facility of the world. It had a 3 decades long history of impeccable security. So it was a scorching hot day. Mingus said maybe 1982. He's not sure. The event is not in his DOE logbook. Reagan was president. Mingus had been promoted to security operations coordinator for Lawrence Livermore Laboratory. A nuke device was being escorted down Rainier Mesa Road. A 5-man security response team with the bomb and an armored vehicle on its own. Then the nuke was being loaded at its destination, an 800 feet deep hole. A single engineer had to make very precise movements with a crane. Each 100-foot increment was called a pick. Only after the second pick could security ease. Almost at the second pick, havoc broke loose. Dick Stock was on the phone to Mingus, and he said, "We're under attack at the device assembly building." By 1980, Mingus had been promoted so much he qualified for what is called G512. This is 3 rungs from the top grade, G515. Mingus thought fast and ordered the nuke put down, all 800 feet. Joe Ben, not sure, test director, agreed in a call with Mingus to contact head of security at AEC. Her name was Pat Williams. Next, Mingus called Larry Ferderber, resident manager of the Nevada test site, resolved to not destroy crypto, classified information. Called Bill Baker, and he said everything was okay. He said, is everything okay? Maybe he was in distress. The bullets in the attacking copter were blanks. Wackenhut Security had done a mock attack testing for weakness, but not informed the Department of Energy. It was like kids were running the test site that day, said Mingus. DOE notified the FBI, who told the Pentagon, who told the White House. Navy put its nuclear subs on alert. Tomahawk missiles were now targeting Area 51. This was mainly to protect the Black Project, the F-117 Nighthawk. As a Lockheed official explained at a banquet, April 2008, Before the advent of stealthy war planners, before the advent of stealth, war planners had to determine how many sorties were necessary to take out a single target. After the innovation of the F-117 stealth bomber, that changed. It became, how many targets can we take out in a single sortie? End of the quote. Edward Lovick worked on every model of the F-117 starting in the early 1970s with Harvey. This was a prototype named after the Jimmy Stewart film about an invisible rabbit, which I find odd because the Nazis were obsessed with using rabbits in their experiments when they would push the limits. The stealth aspects were originally engineered as the A-12 had been. Slide rules and calculators, quoting the book there. But in 1974, two Lockheed engineers named Dennis Overholser and Dick Scherer realized that might be possible to design a stealth aircraft that would take advantage of some of the results of a computer's calculations, and that was directly from Lovick there. Most computers were the size of cars at that time. Our computer at Lockheed ran on punch cards and had less than 60K worth of memory, said Lovick. The concept behind the computer program involved mirrors reflecting mirrors, explained Lovick. Bill Schroeder set to work writing Lockheed's original computer code called Echo. Annie Jacobsen quote there for you. The USAF, otherwise known as United States Air Force, was going to make its own wilderness of mirrors. The mirrors would reflect the radar waves, bouncing them away from, heading back to the radar stations. So then in 1974, Hopeless Diamond began, called so because of looking like the Hope Diamond, and because Lockheed engineers didn't have much hope that it would fly. A series of redesigns later, and it became a full-scale mock-up aircraft codenamed Have Blue. Barnes was in charge of radar testing. He said it looked a lot like the ship in 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. He looked at it from every angle to determine how it showed up on radar. At first it looked like, quote, a big old barn. Several months later, a redesign was tested. It was about the size of a crow this time when it was read on the radar. It was sent back, redesigned, and all they saw was a pole, the pole that was holding up the aircraft. Director of Science and Engineering at Lockheed, Ed Martin, asked Lovick for advice. How would Have Blue appear on enemy radar? He came back with an answer. Roughly equivalent to the size of a man, the Have Blue would appear to radar like a 7/16-inch metal sphere, roughly the size of a ball bearing. And so, quoting Annie here, the customers began rolling the little silvery spheres across the conference table. 1976, Lockheed wins F-117 contract. Made 2 Have Blues at the Skunk Works Building 82. Bob Murphy was in charge of engineering, quoting, fabrication, and assembly. 21 years prior, he had begun in a pair of overalls at Area 51 working for Kelly Johnson as lead U-2 mechanic. F-117 was the first bomber tested in Area 51. They needed to test for bombing accuracy, but there wasn't enough space in the box of Groom Lake. Plus the issue of noise with other projects going on. A deal was struck with the Department of Energy, formerly the Atomic Energy Commission. Quoting, located 70 miles northwest of Area 51, the Tonopah test range was almost in Death Valley. and had been in use as a bombing range and missile launch facility for Sandia laboratories since 1957. The DOE easily cut out a piece of the 624 square mile range for the USAF's Blackbird. This secondary black site is called Area 52. Like Area 51, it has never been officially acknowledged, quote unquote. Tonopah, Nevada was probably the former most lucrative producer of gold and silver ore. And in 1903, quoting Annie here, alone, moving about $2 billion in 2011 currency conversion. End of the quote. The town of Beatty was known as the Chicago of the West in 1907. There was a rail line between Vegas and Tonopah, the Las Vegas and Tonopah Railroad, it was called. It was for a time the West's busiest rail. Quote, almost overnight went bust, and then antelope and wild horses returned to the near ghost town. In 1956, they were overjoyed. Sandia stated it was an ideal location for, quote, secret testing, and added here that could be conducted safely and securely. End of the quote. The Sandians, as they were wanting to be referred as, quoted St. Paul of Tarsus, test all things, hold fast that which is good. Between 1957 up until 1964, Sandia, quote, dropped 680 bombs and launched 555 rockets. And the quote, that was what was now officially, but quietly, the Sandia National Laboratories outpost at Tonopah. 1963, Sandia does a series of secret plutonium dispersal tests. This was called Operation Roller Coaster. Quoting, 3 dirty bomb tests were performed to collect biological data on 300 animals placed downwind from aerosolized plutonium clouds generated from 3 Sandia nuclear weapons. End of the quote. 700 Sandians worked it. Sandia stated it as, quote, the highlight of 1963. This is somewhat similar to Project 57 that took place in 1957. October 1979, beginning of construction of an F-117 Nighthawk support facility. The facility at Area 51 served as the model for Area 52. Similar, quote, runways and taxiways, maintenance hangar, 16 mobile homes, some other permanent support structures. USAF officials grew their hair long to not draw suspicion. Area 51 and 52 worked together to get the F-117 ready. The Wackenhut blunder, Wackenhut security nearly breaking the cover of the F-117. Approximately 10,000 personnel had kept it in the black, and Area 51 and 52 managed to keep 30 years veil of secrecy. So basically just trying to emphasize, it was pretty close. They almost lost their veil of secrecy there. April 12th, 1984, Lieutenant General Robert M. Bond, and that is not Bond, James Bond, died after requesting to pilot an MiG and going through with it. The MiG is a tricky thing to pilot. And Bond, not James Bond, was unfortunately no tech whiz like Bond, James Bond. Had 267 combat missions under his belt, 44 in Korea, 213 in Vietnam. He was highly decorated and revered. He had been Vice Commander of Air Force Systems Command at Andrews Air Force Base. Aside of the MiG-21, in 15 years since, the CIA and USAF had requisitioned an MiG-15, MiG-17, and recently the supersonic MiG-23. We called it the Flogger. It was a very fast plane, almost Mach 3, but it was squirrely, hard to fly. It could kill you if you weren't well trained, said Barnes. So Bond flew the MiG-23 without the necessary 2 weeks of training and paid for it. At approximately Mach 2.5, he went into a spin and was going down. When ejecting after stating, "I've got to get out, I'm out of control," his helmet strap broke his neck. He crashed into Area 25, which was still badly contaminated. This put 5 secret programs at risk. The F-117, the MiG program that had requisitioned this from the Soviets unbeknownst to pretty much anyone, Area 51, Area 52, and the nuke explosions at Jackass Flats. The death of such a high-ranking general would have to be answered for. It was decided to have the MiG-23 leaked quietly to Fred Hoffman, military writer with the AP. One dark program had to come to light to keep the rest obscured. I had to stand up here. Let's recalibrate. 5 years later, November of 1988, a grainy image of the arrowhead-shaped craft was given to the public. It had been flying in different forms for 11 years. By 1974, some say 1979, the CIA gave control of Area 51 to the USAF. 1970s, CIA worked on drones. Hank, can't even read my own writing here. Dierk was in charge of Project Aqualine, a 6 feet long drone designed to look as an eagle or buzzard in flight. It had a small TV camera in the nose, photo equipment, and air sampling sensors under its wings, quoting Annie. Some insiders purport it could test for radiation that was aerosolized, as well as gather electronic intelligence, or ELINT. Jean Petit, the first CIA officer ever assigned to the National Reconnaissance Office, says that spy satellites over the Caspian Sea discovered, quote, an oddly shaped giant multi-engineered watercraft moving in the sea. He says that the original meaning of Project Aqualine was to discover the Caspian Sea Monster, as they refer to it in the CIA and the NRO. So the question was, what were the Soviets up to? 2008, BBC magazine did a story about, quote, a Cold War Soviet hydrofoil named, and I'm probably going to butcher this, a Cranopian. This is what Aqualine really seems to have been about. Quoting, it flew low and was meant to follow along communication lines in foreign countries and intercept messages, said Jim Friedman, Aqualine project assistant. The Aqualine team, 3 pilots, 2 remotely control it. Friedman, he was there for operational support, quote unquote. It crashed a lot, but they got it to fly. The project ended when McDonnell Douglas gave a bid that Dierk felt was $99 million, quote unquote, too high. Hank Dierk, I don't know, took a mock-up of Aqualine after the project was done. Quote, he had it sitting on his bar at his house down in Las Vegas, said Friedman. Project Ornithopter. Quote, bird-like drone designed to blend in with nature by flapping its wings. A smaller third drone was made to look like a crow, landing on windowsills to take pics of CIA watched rooms and targets. Early 1970s, Project Insectothopter. A drone that looked like a dragonfly in flight, emerald green mini fuselage, had a miniature engine that ran on a tiny tank of gas to flap the wings. Office of Research and Development, or ORD, tried utilizing live birds for reconnaissance, even used cats. The bird-sized cameras strapped to the birds tired them out too much, and so one acoustic kitty got ran over by a car, quote unquote, as well. One robotic drone in the early 1970s, financed by DARPA, was made to look like an elephant in the jungles of Vietnam. July 1974, CIA's Special Activities Division files a memorandum of agreement with the USAF, quoting, the top secret project with a classified code name was expected to last about 1 year. 6 permanent personnel were assigned to the test site, with up to 20 personnel on site during peak periods of short duration activity, said aerospace historian Peter Merlin. The USAF agreed to designate hangars 13 through 17 for the CIA's use, rumored to be a Mach 5 or 6 drone. Some of the agency's 1970 Area 51 operations involved sniffing, quote unquote, with sensors for weapons of mass destruction threats. The CIA had been working on this since the 1950s. Early efforts had U-2 pilots flying low and launching javelin-like sensors into the ground. This was part of Operation Tabasco. 1975, church hearings dried up CIA budgets. 1977, Jimmy Carter presidency. Quoting Annie, CIA discretionary budgets were at an all-time low. 1979, CIA learns of probable biologic warfare research, production, and storage installation at Sverdlovsk, Russia. Because of a Sverdlovsk anthrax lethal accident that happened there, the CIA learned 100 people had died from anthrax inhalation. Therefore, the drone program got more budget justification again. So for 25 years, from 1974 to 1999, the USAF and the agency rarely worked together on drones. Winter 2000, USAF and CIA joined together to work on a drone project. They retrofitted the CIA recon drone, the Predator, with anti-tank Hellfire missiles. This was for Osama bin Laden's assassination. Chapter 21, Revelation. I'm not going to go too much longer here. UAV tech and laser-guided precision missiles had to be unified into one drone. The concern was of collateral damage when they were going to assassinate Osama. The new drone tech was tested at Area 51. Osama, architect of 1998 U.S. Embassy suicide bombings of East Africa, killed more than 225 people. Suicide bomb mastermind of the USS Cole, officially declared war against the U.S. President Ronald Reagan's Executive Order 12333 forbid targeted assassination. State Department lawyers got involved. February 2001, State Department okays targeted killing of bin Laden, seeing as the FBI had money for his head. Tarnak Farm, bin Laden's compound. High-profile Middle Easterners would meet there, so collateral damage was still a concern. Worried the State Department lawyers. USAF and CIA made a full-scale mock-up of Tarnak Farm on the outskirts of Area 51. While this was being done, George Tenet, the director of the CIA at that time, decided against using Hellfire missiles. Quoting Tenet here, "This would come to be a regrettable decision." I'm not quoting Tenet, sorry. Annie Jacobsen. So she's saying that he later regretted this, to clarify. The CIA sent 600 drone reconnaissance missions in the Bosnian conflict that began in 1995. CIA drones provided intel for NATO in the 1999 Kosovo campaign, kept an eye on Kosovar Albanian refugee camps, gathered intel searching for targets. The CIA Predator helped war planners there. Now the agency needed the USAF's help. 1 week after 9/11, September 18th, 2001, first drone recon mission. 3 weeks later, Hellfire-equipped Predator drone flew over Kandahar. Quoting, "The rules of aerial warfare had changed overnight." End of the quote. Osama bin Laden and his commandos were now in mountain complexes. Drones would have to be used. Drones had been tested at Area 51, Area 52, and Indian Springs for about 50 years. But the world at large learned of them the morning of November 2nd, 2002. There was a drone strike in Yemen. Al-Houthi, a Yemenian citizen and Al-Qaeda operative, had masterminded the planning and bombing of the USS Cole years before. And yet I said that Osama bin Laden, Obama bin Laden, yes, was the one. Okay, so 5 colleagues and Al-Houthi were instantly incinerated by the Hellfire missiles. Wolfowitz gloated about the strike on CNN. Quote, "A very successful tactical operation. This upset the Yemenians." Brigadier General Yahya M. al-Mutawakkil, Deputy Secretary General of the People's Congress Party in Yemen, gave the Christian Science Monitor an exclusive interview. They broke the scoop that the Pentagon had broken a secrecy agreement. Yemenian officials revealed the plot, orchestrated by Edmund Hole, an employee of the State Department. Hole could speak Arabic and had ancestry in the Marib region. Yemen purported the U.S. State Department bribed local tribespeople to reveal al-Harethi's location. The State Department was accused not just of espionage, but assassination. Not much of a big deal of it was made, even though diplomats are not supposed to do these sort of things. Ambassador Hull was greatly embarrassed. He would not comment on the issue. Hundreds of more drone strikes were to follow. 1 week later, Al-Qaeda's number 3 was targeted and killed, Mohammed Atef. Some strikes were official, others were not mentioned. The CIA nor State Department would admit to any of them. Annie says almost everything, quoting her there, that went on basically past 1968 at Area 51 remains classified. It was 1957 post-Sputnik all over again, the CIA and USAF working in tandem on UAVs, unmanned aerial vehicles, in other words, drones, with limitless budgets appearing as if overnight. The Predator went from RQ-1, that is reconnaissance, RQ-1 Predator, and it became the MQ-1 Predator, and the M stands for multi-use. General Atomics built it. This group was going to launch Ted Taylor's ambitious spacecraft to Mars called Orion. From Jackass Flats in 1958, a second Predator called Predator B was also going green. The Predator's younger yet larger and stronger brother, quote unquote, as it was described by USAF officials. The Predator can carry 200 pounds of weapons, and what they then called the Reaper, the one that they designed after, that I was telling you about, can carry 1.5 tons. So a ton is 2,400 pounds approximately. So it can have about, let's say, 3,600 pounds it can carry. So this is what Predator B, as I was saying, became known as. As well as carrying Hellfire missiles, it can carry multiple GBU-12 laser-guided bombs. Captain Michael Lewis of the 42nd Wing of Creech Air Force Base is the one who gave us that information. As with the U-2, the Predator and Reaper had the USAF and CIA working together. The CIA and USAF, bleh. So here's how you could summarize it. They were often rivals in peacetime, and then when it came to being at war, they had to work together and do their best to set the differences aside. March 29th, 2004, MQ-1 Predator Recon. Brigadier General Frank Gerenk was remotely watching, identifying from somewhere in the Mideast because the remote reconnaissance was so precise. He could see wires. Gerenk stated with this tech he could, quote, put a weapon on a target in minutes, authorizing the strike. Quote, this strike should send a message to our enemies that we're watching you and we will take action. We will take action against you anytime, day or night, if you continue to stand in the way of progress in Iraq. 2003 to 2007, drone strikes grew incrementally, a bit by bit. 2002, they really went green with the drone mania. This year had the last 3 weeks of the Bush administration. There were 36 drone strikes in Pakistan. The USAF stating they killed 268 Al-Qaeda Taliban as well. By 2009, 53 drone strikes. USAF doesn't release numbers and the CIA does not admit to any of the numbers. These are all approximations at best. And it's been put together thanks to journalists. The actual number is not known. T.D. Barnes stated, there are at least 15 satellites and an untold number of Air Force aircraft parked over Iraq and Afghanistan, end quote, at that time. It was called Global Hawk. April 2009, reporters from a French aviation periodical published sketches of a recon drone that flew over Afghanistan. Long wings, no tail, 2 wheels in the belly, in a line like a bicycle, quote unquote. It is known as the Beast of Kandahar. Looks reminiscent of the Horton brothers' Flying Wing of 1944. Quoting Annie. December 2009, Department of Defense admits to the RQ-170 Sentinel, built by Skunk Works. It was tested in Area 51 and 52. Everything else about it was still declassified as of 2011 when she wrote the book. So now, one thing to consider here is that you didn't have Gary Powers, you didn't have Ken Collins, you didn't have a Frank Murray. You just had unmanned aerial vehicles, and you had maybe 2, 3, maybe a few more people that were remotely controlling it. This is how much we had redefined warfare at this point. TV cameras became synthetic aperture radar, or SAR. These were developed by Sandia and Raytheon. They can see and shoot through smoke, I'm quoting, dust, even clouds, even if it's dark. It's not often considered by citizens, but drones need satellite links in order to function. Space in orbits of outer space means a place for drones to reconnaissance and survey on Earth. So here on Earth, the drones need the satellites there in space, to summarize. I'm just going to end there. Yes, dear. Hi.